episode 40 of the Bmoney Beastin podcast. Yet again, I didn't think I would make it this far. And we're having technical difficulties today. As you can see behind me, my futon and my lamp that's crooked that my son left and all that good stuff, right? My virtual background. But I'm here with Jessica Brenton, who is a very interesting individual. She has her own podcast, the Wrestle Her podcast. It's really unique, and she has this really unique background. So I wrote it down because it's so much, and I just want to really start there. Started wrestling at age 5, and obviously I would say, you're with the boys. You'd mention that because back then I'd say girls wrestling really wasn't much of a thing, I'd say at that point in time.
Right.
And then you went to college. You were a 4-time All-American, correct?
Yep.
You had a full ride scholarship, and this is where it gets interesting to me, and I have a question about it. The University of Winnipeg in Canada, this is very interesting to me. And you went on, prior to that, you were the first girl on a boys varsity high school team, which is also really, really cool. So now we're moving forward. You were the director of girls wrestling for the state of Wyoming for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Also very cool. And you established you were at practice, standardized practices for girls wrestling, got them in the state tournament, things like that. That's amazing. And you are currently the head girls coach at Natrona County High School. Did I get that right?
Yes.
I think I did all right with that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think thank you for the introduction.
My first question, though, I got to ask before we get on this road of your story. You wrestled in Canada in college.
Yes.
I'm assuming that was freestyle.
Yes.
Okay. Where did you grow up? Let's start there because you're in Colorado.
I'm in Wyoming.
Wow. Oh, you're still in Wyoming. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're in Wyoming. You were in college in Canada. Let's start from the beginning. Where did you start? Where are you from? The differences if you did start in the United States, I just want to know the whole thing. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay. Let me pause for a sec. I need to plug my computer in because it's going to die. So hold on.
There we go. We're back. Go ahead.
Well, I was born in Billings, Montana, and I started out doing dance and gymnastics, and my older brother wrestled, and I would go to their practices, and they would let me play the games at the end of the practice with the boys, and I was pretty strong because I was in gymnastics and pretty flexible, so I was pretty good and was beating up on all the boys at practice. So I asked my mom if I could quit dance to wrestle, and she thought it would be a phase. And my dad was super pumped, and he's like, "Yeah, you want to play hockey too?" And I'm like, "No, Dad, hockey's for boys." So I started wrestling and loved it, and I was the only girl ever. And then we moved to Wyoming when I was in 2nd grade, and I kept wrestling at Windy City Wrestling Club, and there was a few girls here and there, but not a lot of girls. When I got to high school, there was no girls. There was maybe a couple girls here and there, but I never had to wrestle any girls in high school. Did pretty well in high school. I had to stay at a lighter weight class because I was wrestling boys. So I was 112, 119, and then I got to 125, and that was pretty hard to hang with the boys at that weight class just because we got different body types, and they're a little stronger at that point in their arms, and I had good hips, and I was flexible, but after that weight class it was pretty hard to keep with the boys. So I had a heart injury. I found out that I had mitral valve prolapse, and I started passing out, and had a heart defect, and so I didn't wrestle my senior year, and I just was the manager on the team. But I decided to go to Fargo and wrestle one more time to see how I could do, and leave it all out there. And I got a Florida scholarship at that tournament. I ended up taking 5th, and the coach that recruited me said that he watched me last year at Fargo, and he was really impressed by me and my attitude, and he wanted me to come to Winnipeg. From Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Yep, here we go.
Okay. So I got a full ride scholarship to go wrestle in Winnipeg, Manitoba. This was 2 weeks before school started. I had planned on being done wrestling, and that was going to be my last hurrah. So we sat down, talked about the pros and cons of, what it would be like if I went to Canada and wrestled, and I decided to take the chance and go. And
before you get there, I got a question on that.
Okay.
In that moment, like for one, like everybody knows about Fargo, but I never knew there was Canadian coaches at Fargo. You assume like that's one thing that sparked my interest too. Since you're an American, you had to get a passport and there was like a process. So explain that process as you got there.
So I didn't have a passport. So I had to go to Colorado and go to the embassy and show them my scholarship that I got and expedite my visa so I could get it that day. And they gave me a 10-year visitor's visa to go to school up there. And it was a lot in that 2-week span to pack my life up and go to another country and get a visa. And my mom and dad drove me down there. I was driving past the border. We get on the other side of the border, and they have kilometers per hour, not miles per hour. So instead of 100, I'm like, oh, wow, we can go super fast over here. And my dad's like, no, don't go that fast. And then I got there, and I was the only recruit. So everybody else was from Winnipeg. So the first year I was I was the best one on my team, just because I was the only recruit and I was the only one to go to nationals. So I was the only person from my team to go to nationals. So I was warming up with like Calgary. And so we were Team Calipeg. And it was cool because like all the parents like watched me. And so they would all cheer for me, even though I was from a different school. And so that was fun. And then I got Rookie of the Year the first year that I was there. In Canada West, and then I ended up taking 4th place at nationals, and then second year I was captain of my team, and we had a full recruited team that year, so that was awesome. That was a really fun year. And then we went again, and I ended up taking 5th that year. So then ended up leaving, met a boy, stayed in Canada for a couple years, and then I came back to Wyoming, and they just reached out to me. I'm pretty known in the wrestling world in my town, and so I had one of the people that I knew reach out to me and said, hey, we need a girls director for the Wyoming Amateur Wrestling Association. Would you be interested in that role? And I was like, yeah, sure. And going from Canada back to Wyoming, Canada is crazy amount of girls. Like they teach girls how to wrestle in elementary school. They don't need to wear singlets. They were wearing tennis shoes. Like it was crazy the amount of girls that I saw, and I'd never seen that before ever. So I'm like, why are we so far behind? We're supposed to be like the equality state in Wyoming. So I don't understand why we don't have girls wrestling the way that Canada does. So I got to work. And I started out making like a highlight video that was like, I support girls wrestling. And then I got a bunch of people to say I support girls wrestling and who they were and why they support girls wrestling. And then, I had one girl that was similar to my situation. She was just on the boys team and she was really good. And she was the only one that I took to nationals, and she would become an All-American every time we took her anywhere. And then I started having a girls wrestling camp just so girls could have a girls environment and feel comfortable wrestling in that environment. And then we kept going to a bunch of national tournaments. I would take them to duels in Iowa. I would take them to Western regionals. I would take them to the US Open in Vegas. And then of course we would go to Fargo. And then we went to a couple dual tournaments. We went to like the Scholastic duels in Florida, and teams just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and girls kept getting added. And then COVID hit, and we were supposed to go to the Gotham City Open is what it was called, and we were
where was that?
New York. So I was super excited to go to that, and all the girls were getting pumped to go, and then COVID hit, so we didn't get to go. So I was a little upset about that one. And then numbers went back down because obviously it was COVID and nobody could wrestle with each other. But then the next year we got numbers back up and we took 5 teams to the Iowa duels, which was pretty big for Wyoming. And then we got sanctioned in our state, so that was pretty awesome. I was actually on a flight to Las Vegas to go coach when I got the news that we got sanctioned. So,
how many years into this was that?
What?
How many years into you starting this did it become a sanctioned sport?
7.
It took 7 years to sanction.
7 years. Yeah.
Wow. Because that was a short story there. You were like in general us talking, but that's over a 7-year period it took to get girls wrestling sanctioned in the state. That's mind blowing. Continue.
And I think that it took that long because I had to adjust people's mindset, and that's hard to do.
It is very hard to do. Yes.
Like I had to prove that girls belonged here. I always had to prove that I belonged on a wrestling mat, and I gained respect because they saw me wrestle. So the girls that are just starting didn't really get to do that because they didn't know how to wrestle. So I had to kind of be the advocate for them and, show them that, hey, like this isn't a boys' sport. Like, and it was from the coaches and it was from the male adults, that were saying, hey, no, girls don't belong here. Like, so it was hard to change that mindset for people until they saw us on the mat. That's a thing that I think that goes for any business or anything you do, right? There's this older demographic that consistently pushes their narrative, okay? Like regardless what it is, and we're talking about wrestling, but I'll just give you a different example. In the past decade, I work, my other space that I work in is in the telecommunications industry. And there's been a way that they've done things for, 40 years. And 10 years ago, we bucked the system. And now they're finally accepting us, right? After about, a decade. And that's exactly what hit me when you said it took 7 years, because you got this older demographic. Yeah.
And it's just like now, right? You got groups of people that are like, for instance, that are in charge of like the AAU. I'm just making this up, but you got people that are over like AAU, right?
Yeah.
Hasn't done anything to try to relate to this younger generation, right? Like at all. Like the days of posting a flyer and saying, hey, sign up for this is over, right?
Right.
Like you have to kind of evolve. And it just blows my mind that it took that long to, hey, I've been running these camps. I got these girls. Like that's mind blowing to me that it took that long to get girls wrestling. Now, I will say this. I live in the South. So Georgia, is still kind of on the cusp. I live in Georgia. Tennessee's had a pretty solid like girls program for the past couple of years now. It's been about three years, I'd say, 3 or 4. So, but you look now, and if you look at the statistics, the fastest growing sport in the country is women's wrestling.
Right.
Like without a doubt. Like I'm such a fan, dude. Like Piper Fowler, you probably know that name, right? Piper Fowler. She's literally 45 minutes from us, right? Like right up in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Great kid. I remember watching her in middle school at some of these local middle school tournaments. I think she was like 162-0 or something in middle school, like with boys, like just beating the piss out of everybody.
Yeah.
And she was kind of like the figurehead for Cleveland. Cleveland's dominant down here and they go everywhere and they're pretty dominant. And dude, like when you have something like that, and she went to the Worlds 2 years ago and won it. Like I watched that match and like she almost got put on her back and like, bridged through and just held on. It was like so intense. And everybody knows that kid was rooting for her, right? So like she like kind of set a standard barrier. And now Cleveland has a girls like youth club. It's got like 60 little girls in there, all because of Piper. It started with Piper. And then like let me think. You got the Grassman kid that's a senior now or a junior. She's a real stud and kind of a figurehead there. I'm trying to think. They got a bunch down there. Look up Cleveland High School girls wrestling in Tennessee, dude. They got Josh Boskin runs it. He ran the boys club and everything for a long time. They're knocking it out of the park. But all this has evolved in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
in like maybe a couple years. When you're telling me 7 years, that's where I'm getting at. It's just mind blowing. So.
Yeah. I think it's, having people on the mat, like women on the mat, I think that is a huge help to get it growing, because then little girls see, those girls on the mat and they're like, wow, girls wrestle. I want to do that. So I think having more and more and more girls in the high school has definitely helped. And then, we finally got sanctioned, which was the best day. And I cried.
So from getting sanctioned as a legit sport in the state of Wyoming, which I've never been to Wyoming, but I can imagine it's a beautiful state. I can imagine that it is. In Billings, Montana, when you said that, I was like, man, that part of the country, like I've never really been out west. I've been up the Eastern Seaboard and whatever, but like that's got to be a great place to live and kind of grow up. And I just wanted to throw that out there. But anyway, my dad's from West Virginia, so I always kind of like correlated that part of the country with like West Virginia with mountains, trees, all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But when you get sanctioned, right, and you're like, okay, this is a legit sport now. How long did it take before like clubs started popping up? When our clubs started adding like girls practices? Like what was the first year of the state tournament like compared to what it is now?
So the first year was 3 years ago.
Okay.
So we got sanctioned, and then it's kind of funny. My old head coach, who coached me, was still the boys' coach, and he called me and he was like, "Hey, women's wrestling just got sanctioned, and Natrona County High School is gonna get a program. Would you want to come coach?" Absolutely, yes. So I went to my old high school, which is pretty nostalgic, and just I loved that I wrestled there, and now I'm coaching there.
Very cool,
first year, it was good, but there was a lot of things that people weren't ready for. Like I loved seeing all the girls on the mats, don't get me wrong, but nobody had girls wrestling singlets. They kind of just pushed the girls to the back of the tournaments and ran the boys first, and then had the girls, and the girls would wrestle like bam, 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 right away. And they didn't care about wait times. And then they had the girls wrestle the finals for state on a different day than the boys. So it's kind of like, yes, we were there, but we weren't really showcased properly. And then the second year, it grew like double the amount of people. And then so girls were being added to these tournaments again, and we were like, okay, let's not put them in the back of the tournament. Let's make a boys round, a girls round, a boys round, a girls round, and that's how it should be ran. So they started to do that, but they didn't take into account for the growth, the numbers, the extra people in the tournament. So they had the same exact mats, the same exact everything format. And it's like, well, you have 350 more athletes in this tournament. So they would go till 11:30 at night, and then we'd have to get up at 7 and weigh in the next morning. So that was kind of a struggle. But then that year we were showcased with the boys and had to finals at the exact same time. And that was awesome. So I loved to see that. And then, this is our third year. And now we have like girl individually at their own high school or at their own middle school. It could be the same tournament as the boys, but they're having their own mats and their own brackets separate from the boys. And sometimes we'll do finals together. But other times it's just the girls tournament and it's just a boys tournament, which it needs to be like that. I love that they're still trying to showcase and stuff, but I love that we are pushing forward and we need our own space. So I love that they're doing that.
So I'll tell you how it is kind of in our area, and you tell me if it compares at all. Like at our high school, I'm from Ringgold, Georgia. Probably never heard of it. You ever heard of Chattanooga, Tennessee?
Yeah.
Okay, I live about 12 miles south of downtown Chattanooga.
Okay.
Where I'm at, our local high school, I went to Ringgold. I was a football guy. But last year on the high school team, I think there was 2 girls. Okay, and you look at across the county, I think LFO is like a rival school. They had like 8, I think. And then Heritage, I think, has got the most. There's 3 schools in our county. I think they got like 12 or 13, which is good numbers starting to build, right?
Right.
But I haven't seen I really at all girls wrestling at the middle school level outside a club, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like, having youth clubs, like I mentioned Cleveland earlier, having youth clubs that have like a little girls program, which is freaking awesome, dude. They got like the pink and light blue singlets, and they mirror like the boys, but it's their kind of version. Like that's a great thing. But when they get to middle school, what do kids want to do? They want to hang out with their friends, and they want to, and if all you can do is like AAU tournaments, well, eventually, it's cool or whatever. And even through middle school, we did that. But I think that needs to be a sanctioned thing across the board. If, there's boys wrestling, there should be girls wrestling in the middle schools, right?
Yes, I agree.
And I think you can pull girls through middle school years, even 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And by the time they're seniors, they could be killers, right?
Yeah.
It just needs to be offered, because the thing that I've learned over all these years with my son that came up with this whole Bmoney Beastin concept, by the way, that I'm running now, by the way. So, dude, what I've learned is that the casual parent, right? They don't know about training centers. They don't know about clubs. They don't know about AAU memberships and USA Wrestling memberships. They don't know any of that.
Right.
They know what the school tells them.
Exactly.
So if the school, you got a coach, it's like, hey, there's this great training center. We're going to start going down here. They'll be all for it, right?
Yeah.
But they don't know. So if there's not girls middle school wrestling, I feel like it's still stunting the growth of women's wrestling.
Yeah, I agree. So in Wyoming, we have middle school wrestling. I was a coach for middle school. I coached it for a few years. We ran into a situation where it's a Title IX violation to have the season where it is, because girls have to choose between swimming and wrestling and boys don't. So there's no board for our middle school here in Wyoming. So half of our state moved their season to during high school after Christmas, and half of the state is before Christmas. And that's when their season ends. So we had to, as being on that Wyoming Amateur Wrestling Association board, we have a middle school state, and we didn't know when to have that. And that's the qualifier for a national tournament. So we had to have it in December, and half the girls didn't even have a season yet. So that is definitely something that we need to get on board with and all together on the same page, because that's confusing and that's hurting the girls in the sport. So I think we all need to be on one page, and we either need to be before or after, and let's all do it. And I do think it needs to be separate, because that's how it grows.
Do you in your state, you said, you have 2 different seasons there for half the state and half the state.
Yeah.
And the middle school level, are they wrestling freestyle in the winter?
No.
It's folk style.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a folk style season. I think, for me, if it was me and it was up to me, which I have no say so in anything, I sell a card game and we create cool stuff. So, but if it was up to me, the way I would do this is, I think across the board in the United States, right? High school season is pretty much the same for the boys across the board, across the country, right? It's almost the same within a week or two. It starts about the same time and ends about the same time.
Right.
In most middle school situations, now there's some states that go a little longer, like Georgia is 8 weeks or something for middle school for boys. Tennessee goes through to the end of January to do a dual state or whatever they do. So it's a little different, but it's still within the same time period, maybe a couple weeks difference.
Right.
Across the board, there should be a sanction. And if you said a Title IX violation?
Yeah, so Title IX being same opportunities for girls and boys athletics. So
here's the fix. Here's the easy fix. Offer boys swimming. Nobody's going to do it, but you can offer it. There's no problem. Right.
But they didn't want to do that, because then that would run into some other problem where we can't have, I don't know. There was just go back and forth on the problems of why we couldn't change the boys' season and why we could change the girls' season. And my argument was, I can't coach both the junior high and the high school if it's during the same time, because I have 2 different high schools in my town, and that's considered recruiting if I do that. We can't be in the same practice room. So that was my argument of why we shouldn't move. And that is with a lot of the cities in my state is, the high school coaches are coaching the middle schools. So it's hard for them to do both. So, yeah, I'm hoping that it gets better, but I don't know what the next year is going to look like.
Here's my outlook. Like I was saying, here's my outlook on it. I think that honestly, like USA Wrestling or what some, an organization, I'd say USA Wrestling be the best one. AAU's kind of whatever, needs to get together and say across the board, and I'm sure they would push the freestyle narrative, right? Because, the Olympic styles and things. But if that's the case, that's fine, right? If they're going to wrestle, if they can wrestle freestyle in the winter, dude, who cares? That's cool. Whatever the situation. But they need to set standards that, you start the season by, October 15th or whatever the date is, right? And then it ends before, I don't know, Christmas or before January 15th or whatever the dates are, right? That across the board, girls wrestling, it has to happen at the middle school level between this time period, right? Period. All right. And then as a governing body, maybe instead of running it through like, TSAA or whatever, like in Tennessee or GHSA in Georgia or whatever, Wyoming athletics, or whatever, instead of running it through that, run it through USA Wrestling, right? Yeah. And have a standard barrier of what this is. And, the whole, you can't coach, if you're coaching high school, middle school. I don't know what it's like out there, but like here, there's a lot of scenarios where the high school team and the middle school team, they practice together, right?
Right.
And then at the same time, though, you have a high school coach and a middle school coach, which seems to be the issue that you're running into.
Yeah.
So combined practices, is that legal out there? Is that okay? Combined practices?
So it is in a city that there's not another high school. So there's another high school in my town. So I cannot do that in my city. Other cities, yes, they can do that. But mine specifically, no, my district won't allow it.
We had an issue last summer in Catoosa County. And I won't name names, even though, anybody that knows me that sees this will know what I'm talking about. But there was a guy, he was the middle school coach at one school, and he owned a gym, like his side business, right? You're allowed to have a side business.
Right.
And we would go in a couple of days a week and do CrossFit workouts, right? Like, just to kind of get at, in between practices or whatever. And then one of my son's buddies wanted to go. Then he's like, yeah, man, bring him, whatever, So he came. And then another kid started coming that we knew. Like it was just kind of, bringing kids along.
Right.
Well, before long, all of them were at that middle school. Okay. Now, nothing was done illegally. There was no recruiting, right? The other school that was getting 2 of the 3 of those kids didn't like that and filed like an injunction. Now, they questioned me. They questioned other parents. I said, look, dude, I live here. I'm from here. I don't want to hear it. I don't care. Click, but it was a big to-do. And since then, like I've been pushing to have like freestyle for the high schools. Like there's a training center in Chattanooga we go to, and there's one down in North Georgia. So, there's opportunities to wrestle. But I've been trying to throw out the scenario going back to parents don't know, the casual parent don't understand these things.
Right.
To do like, we're in different classifications, right? One school's in high school, one school's in 2A, and one school's in 3A, right? Mm-hmm. So why can't we have combined freestyle, right? Like we're not competing. It's not a competition. But then it comes back to what you're talking about, the whole possible, recruiting issue kind of thing. So in your situation, since you can't do that, what do you think's a solution in your state for girls middle school to be across the board kind of thing like I kind of threw out? What would your solution be, you think?
Well, first of all, we need a board of some sort. Like it's strictly up to the athletic directors on what they want to do with their season. There's nobody telling them what to do. So, like the high school here has the Wyoming Athletic Association, and that's who tells them what to do and what they can and cannot do, what their weight classes are. They got a sanction. They say you could have a girls program. So we need some sort of board over the middle school in order to control what's happening to the middle school. And it blows my mind that we don't, honestly. And I don't even know how I would go about getting a board, but that's definitely something that needs to happen. And so we can all be on the same page, because we definitely all need to be on the same page if we want to grow middle school wrestling, girls and boys.
That's one of those things too, that I believe that when you have to have structure, I think, in anything you do.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest issue that I've seen in the past decade with just the sport of wrestling, right?
Right.
At the high school level, you got some coaches that do a phenomenal job, right?
Right.
And then you have some guys that are only there from, the day they have to do their first, hydration test till the state tournament, and they're only in and out, and they got some other guy doing this or that.
Right.
So, and you see the results of both situations, right? The guy that's all in, they normally win pretty regular, right?
Yeah.
The guy that's in and out, right? That's where everybody falls back on the training centers.
Mm-hmm.
But anything you do, and this is my opinion, anything you do in life, man, you have to have structure.
Yes.
And right now, what you're telling me is that the girls' middle school scenario is completely and utterly just all over the place.
Yeah, it's just a free for all. And yeah, like I said, the middle school athletic directors are in charge of their school, and they're deciding what they're doing for their school. They don't have anybody telling them what to do.
Yeah, there needs, and that goes back to what I was saying, and maybe they can't do it through USA Wrestling. I'm not sure. I don't know laws and things, but there has to be some kind of structured approach across the board to make this feasible. Because without it, we're really, like we said earlier, we're stunning the growth of women's wrestling.
Right. Because like youth, like there's tons of clubs. There's tons of youth clubs around the state, and they are growing tremendously and have a ton of girls. But yeah, when they get to middle school, it's like, okay, you're missing a 2 to 3 year gap, and then you go to high school and it's back to structure again. So yeah, we need structure in the middle school really bad in my state personally.
I think that's across the board though, because like I said, I've never even really seen like a team, like school team of middle school and with girls, at least around me. Yeah. I'm sure it exists, and right. I'm sure it's down in it, like maybe in the Atlanta area, I'd say, but like I haven't seen it. So
which
I know
makes sense, because like I said, like the youth little girls, there's so many little girls. And then we get to middle school and it's like, okay, well, we'll do this if you guys want to do this, but we don't know. And then high school, it's so structured. So it's like, why are we missing that gap? Like that's when girls will quit. That's when girls like get different bodies, and start to develop. And that's when they go through weird times and we're like, okay, well, I don't want to wrestle boys now. Like, and their parents are not okay with them wrestling boys now. So like that is where we need to get on that same page, because that's where girls quit wrestling, because they don't want to wrestle boys and they're going through weird bodies and weird hormones. And, we all need to get on the same page with that, because I feel like that's a crucial area for girls is middle school.
I think that, that, like I said, back to structure, you go back to, like in our situation in our county, at our school, the youth club, I mean, it's okay, right? It's not a hammer club or anything, but we have so many options and so many different places for kids to go. And it's pretty known for the most part, because, they do a good job on social media. And I feel like social media is key to almost anything, right? Yeah. Because where are people at? How do you get their attention? That's a big thing.
Right.
So, like Grindhouse, we have Minion, there's opportunities for these things. Now, in Cleveland up there has a great club. So there's a lot of opportunities. But then in our situation, we have a pretty good middle school coach, and then you get to the high school, and the high school's all over the place. Yeah. And then you look across the county, and the middle school's a mess, and their youth club was a mess. Like Heritage is kind of rebuilding now. They had a guy take over, and he's doing a really good job now. But over the past couple of years, the youth club was ridiculous, useless. Then you had like a middle school program that really didn't do anything. And then the high school was just, they just had some kids that were always at training centers. So it wasn't, again, I'm talking about a boys program. You didn't have like top to bottom structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you brought it up, the one thing you said that really piqued my interest is, why are we missing the middle?
Yeah.
And dude, I think that, like you said, that's the time. And I think that's for boys, girls, whatever.
That's a crucial time.
Yes, in development, man. And it's not just in wrestling, it's in your life. You kind of develop who you are. So, and to have that, you have kids and you see it, and I'm sure you see it. You're at a high school, right? So you're around, kids, and imagine how many girls that maybe get cut from the girls' basketball team. I'm just making this up. That could go out and be a state champ in wrestling.
Yeah.
All right. Like, I seen a kid at Dalton High School that got cut from basketball. This is down in North Georgia. This was like 3 or 4 years ago. And dude, he literally wrestled for like a week, like 7 or 8 or 10 days. But literally less than 2 weeks. And he went to the McCallie tournament, which is like a pretty big, tournament here in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. They're a private school up in Tennessee. They have a big tournament every year.
Yeah.
And he won it. And it was like, what? So, that's a 1 in a million kind of thing. But at the same time, how many girls get cut from basketball or another winter sport? What else is a winter sport? I'm just making that up. Or a girl that plays softball that wants to get in shape for softball, or in the spring, or, there's so many of these scenarios that parents aren't going to, they work jobs and they pay bills and they probably yell at each other all the time. Whatever the scenario, they got their life problems.
Right.
The odds of them getting out of their bubble to go research and how can I get my girl into wrestling, they're probably not even thinking of that. Yeah. So, but if they bring a flyer home that says, hey, we got middle school wrestling, now your wheels start turning.
Right.
So I'm with you. That middle gap, and I think that's for boys, girls across the board. That is such a crucial time period. So yeah, structure needs to occur. I completely agree.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that even happens. Honestly, like, I don't know how to get like a board together to do that, but something needs to happen for sure for the middle school, because they need more structure and they need more support for sure.
Absolutely. So tell me this, man. We're having a good conversation. We had some technical difficulties, and I apologize to everybody else see this, but we're having fun, even though that, you can see my goofy futon and we've dropped out a few times. But with that being said, I think that this has been really cool and engaging. But I want to know how you went from creating girls wrestling in the state of Wyoming, which is really cool. And it's almost like you're a pioneer in a way, because like, I can only imagine that when you were younger, when you got into like high school, middle school and high school, and, you had to be really mentally tough at times, I would say, right? Like, and you're the only girl, so everybody's going to look at you different, right? Like, you're wrestling on a boys team. Like, you really, like, from your story, like, fought through like a lot of barriers throughout your life to where you are now, which is absolutely amazing, and props to you. But what led you from that, and now you're a high school coach, and what's up with the wrestle? Tell us about the Wrestle Her podcast, because I think that this is amazing that you are just like this pioneer for women's wrestling, and I think that it's only a good thing for the sport across the country, because the more people that see there's people backing women's wrestling, the more and you might have a girl, what do kids do 99% of the time now? Social media, right? They're scrolling reels. Hey, they're cooking waffles, or hey, they're whatever. And now they're going to see you making women's wrestling really cool. And how many kids do you think maybe see a reel that you put out and says, dude, I think I could do that? That's big. So tell us how you started that.
Okay, well, so the whole, having people give me struggles in the fighting adversity thing. I grew up with 6 brothers, so I never thought being on a boys team was weird, because that was my life. I always had people hating on me. I had moms come like yell at me after I got off the mat, after I pinned their son, and I shouldn't be here, and girls shouldn't wrestle, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, can you move? I need to go talk to my dad. Excuse me. And
hold on 1 second. Keep that thought. I want to tell you something to make you feel better. Okay.
Okay.
3 years ago, we went, or 3 or 4, I think it was 4 years ago. Bryson, I took him to the Tyrant Duels in Ohio. Okay. Mm-hmm. We wrestled a girl named Lyric Hetzer. Okay. She's a stud, dude. Stud kid. He barely beat her. He beat her 5-4, and he comes off breathing like he had just like hit the biggest bong hit of his life, right? And I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you? And he's like, dude, she's tough, man. I was like, yeah, man, she is. And he comes off, and a month passed, and we wrestled her again at VAC. And she beat him 5-4. And I remember he was so pissed. At the end of the match, she had legs in, and he's trying to get out the back. And the ref's standing over here, and his head is stuck between her legs, and he is fighting like hell to get his head out. And I remember he got so mad, he threw his headgear. Like, we were at the Virginia Beach, the big place at Virginia Beach. And he slung his headgear, and there's like 80 mats there, and he slung it like it probably went from one corner to halfway to the other. We never did find it. And I'm like, dude, what are you so mad about? Like, dude, I just lost to a girl. I was like, but she's a badass girl.
Yeah.
So like, the thing about wrestling, like up into a certain age, like you said, when you hit like 125 and it was kind of getting a little different with body types.
Yeah.
When they're young, man, technique wins, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there to you, that whoever's parents said that to you, man, just, I ain't going to say a bad word, but yeah, it's up a road. Continue.
Yeah. So yeah, I always had like people telling me I shouldn't be here, and, people saying after I got back, that this is a man's sport. And so like, I've always had an uphill battle, always. So like, this isn't anything new to me, but the podcast came to fruition because, well, I had a friend that did podcasts, and he was like, you've got a really big niche here. Like, this is something that not a lot of people talk about, and I think you'd have a good following. He had a studio, and he had all this stuff to record, and he like helped me put my podcast together, and was like, let's do this. And so I was like, okay, sure, why not? So I started my podcast, and I think I'm taking this from Bjorg Wigney. She and I talked about this on my podcast one time, but the whole name, like Wrestle Her has always been like, oh, I have to wrestle her. Like, oh, I got a girl, like I'm going to kick her ass, or, oh, I got a girl, like she's not very good. Like, but now it's like more of a term of endearment of, I have to wrestle her. She's pretty good. I have to wrestle her. So like, I want that to be like something that, people think about, like they have to wrestle her. She's good. And this is a term of empowerment, not like, oh, I got to wrestle her. And like, it's a negative thing, So I think that's like a great thing about the name of the podcast. But yeah, it just gives the girls a voice, and it gives people, a voice from a girl's perspective to talk about the sport, because this is a beautiful sport and it's so much fun and amazing. And nobody should tell you that you shouldn't be here, because if you love it, do it. And so like, that's kind of just where I'm at with it. And, I just am trying to help the girls be seen and heard. And, if it helps people, it helps people. And if it doesn't, then, they get their little 15 minutes of fame for a little bit. So it's been a fun and awesome journey so far.
I want to share something with you. We, I don't know if you know much about what we're doing. We just kind of chatted back and forth. 4 years ago, we started Bmoney Beastin. It's kind of like an apparel brand. And then we shifted, and now we do like just some gear packages for some local schools and some, places. And we've sent shoes to a lot of underprivileged kids. But we created Mat Clash, which is a card game. Okay. And it seems to be very well received. They're starting to be sold now at Tyrant tournaments. They're taking it on the road. But I wanted to show you this. We're really big on kind of sticking to the girls. We want to relate to the girls. So we created female characters. Okay. And we named her Collie. And in our story, she's the daughter of our coach character. Okay. And Natty was the first one. Nice. And you notice we went with the pink and the light blue. And of course, she's wearing, you see the shoes she's wearing right there? We actually sold those for about a year. Nice. So that was pretty cool. And then Savage is our newest character.
Okay.
And I just got my partner out in California. He's our graphic artist, and he comes up with these like concepts.
Yeah.
And she was sent to me about 2 weeks ago. I was like, dude, we need another girl. And I kind of pushed for the girls, right? And
Right.
like I want them to kind of and he is too, right? Like we're on the same base with that.
Yeah.
But I just thought I wanted to show you that I think everybody in the wrestling community really wants to push women's wrestling. And I think that even in our card game, like we're doing that. And like in wave 2 of the card game, we've got, I think half the deck is female characters.
Mm-hmm.
So my theory in that is that maybe I'm just making this up. Little Johnny's at a tournament, playing Mat Clash with his buddy, and his sister hops in and sees her. Well, can I do that? Boom, you got another one.
Right.
So that's kind of I think a great thing when you have enough people that believe in something. I think eventually it's going to happen across the board, and I think we're already off to the races in some points.
Right.
Of course, Pennsylvania's past all of us in every facet in the world of wrestling, but like outside of like PA and maybe Illinois and like Ohio, maybe I think all of us are catching up in a pretty quick way.
Yeah.
Like I remember a couple of years ago, like we would do freestyle and we went to the schoolboy duels, and we had to go to Life University down in Atlanta for like practice or whatever, and we were. And I didn't even know it, but Life had, was starting to kind of get together like a female program, like a woman's program. And it's pretty cool to see. And, they just voted in, D1, 2, and 3 is going to be. And I'm like, once now that it's real, it's real. And I said this 3 or 4 years ago. If I had a daughter right now that was little, I wouldn't put her in gymnastics. I wouldn't put her in softball. I'd put her on a wrestling mat because there's so many opportunities that are coming, especially now. And then you got to think about NIL. Imagine if you came out now with NIL deals.
Yeah.
What would you be doing? Like taping 50s together for toilet paper? Because like, dude, they pay you.
Right.
And that's the thing. Like there's so many opportunities that are on the horizon for little girls and young women that are coming up now.
Well, not even just little girls like that. Like from my perspective, I could go coach a D1 school now. Like, there's so many opportunities for women now because of wrestling, and it's crazy. Like
I didn't even think of that.
You what?
I didn't even think of that, but you're exactly right. Like now, can you imagine? Now, I don't know that this will probably never happen. But, there's several D1 coaches that are just ridiculously famous. The Brands boys and Sanderson. And, you got these type of guys. Imagine if, and I don't, like I said, this very rarely probably won't happen. But imagine a guy on that level who, maybe, let's just say John Smith, right? Mm-hmm. He retired, and David Taylor took over. Imagine Oklahoma State said, hey, I'll give you $5 million to coach 2 years to get our program off the ground. That in itself, if that happened one time, it would be like I just made up a scenario, but that would snowball, right? Because if you had one guy like that come in that has that name value that gets paid in that realm, now you're going to have another school and another school and another school and another school and another school, and they're all wanting to keep up with each other. Yeah. So I think it would just snowball, which would be super cool. I didn't think of that aspect, but you're absolutely right. Like I can't imagine really what they would pay for a Division I women's wrestling coach.
So there's 5 currently. There's 5 Division I girls programs. Mm-hmm. And my state, University of Wyoming, they were like, no, like we got to wait for it to be an actual sport. We're not doing it yet. Because there's no colleges in my state at all. So girls have to leave my state to go to college if they want to wrestle. So like this getting passed is massive. Like, so I can see UW getting a program in the next 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years at the most, because that's all that they were waiting on. They were waiting on support, and now it's coming and it's here now. So yeah, I'm excited to see that, and hopefully when that opportunity comes along, I can be like, hello, hi, my name's Jessica Brenton. Do you need a coach? What's up?
Dude, if that happens, I want us to reconnect at that point in time, and I want us to stay in connection, right? If I can ever help you in any way, please let me know. I'm all about helping the sport in any way we can.
Yeah.
But if I can see a scenario, man, where in 10 years from now, I'm just making this up, the Wyoming Cowgirls, how cool would that be, right?
Yeah.
And you think about it, the NCAAs every year is a huge event, right, for the men. And like it's packed to the freaking rafters. You got, the dads they talk about, like I'm just going to use Vito, right? Vito's dad was there in the crowd, and they're talking about his accomplishments and, and dude, I think, can you imagine how many coaches had daughters?
Yeah.
And now they're going to talk about dad and his accomplishments and now what she's doing. She won Fargo, whatever. And in 10 years' time, if this is done the right way, and the brands are still the same, right? Iowa's Iowa, Penn State's Penn State.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? There'll be people hanging from the rafters to watch girls wrestling.
Exactly. And I had this conversation recently with another male coach, and he's like, I don't know if we're ever going to get D1. I don't know. It's not sustainable. What facts and proof have you ever seen ever right now that girls is not sustainable? Once we started, it blew up like 3,000%, and it's just growing and growing and growing. Where in your knowledge can you tell me why it wouldn't be sustainable? He's like, well, people don't want to watch girls wrestling. You are incorrect, sir. Like, you are so incorrect. It's crazy. Girls are so much fun to watch. Girls are so I went to, we had a girls duel at my high school, and then we had a boys duel at the other high school as dual tournaments. Ours was loud. Everybody was screaming for each other. All the girls were cheering each other on. It was so much fun. You go to the boys duel, it's silent. It's so much fun to be at a girls' duel. So I disagree strongly with that statement that it's not sustainable. So I'm excited to see where this goes and prove that guy wrong.
Well, there's also this factor. The casual viewer in general, imagine that if they're going to broadcast the NCAAs like they do on ESPN, in a few years they're going to do that with the women, right? Yeah. They're going to have to. Right. So the casual viewer is the first thing they're probably going to think is this like girls fighting? Because that don't know the sport of wrestling. But then they're gonna be like, holy dude, that's pretty cool. And then you may gain a couple million people that are the casual viewer. And that goes, you go back to, I grew up, I was like, I'll use pro wrestling as an example, right? Everybody loved Steve Austin in the 90s, right? And if you were clicking through the channels, and you seen Sable, do you remember her? Look her up if you get a chance. But she was in Playboy and all that. But if you were clicking through the channels and you seen Sable, they're going to gain new fans or Steve Austin. Yeah. And now you're looking at that and I'm just using that as an example, but you look at girls wrestling and it's going to say like NCAA women's wrestling. Well, what the hell? What? And first thing they're going to think is it like WWE? And then they're going to think, is it like MMA? And then they're going to watch and they're going to be like, holy crap, girls do this? And then they're going to kind of be invested. And now, of course, there'll be people that change the channel, but they do that with everything. But there's going to be a big demographic of people that are just like, girls do this? And who knows, maybe grandpa sees it and he calls his son who's got a 5-year-old daughter, and next thing, it's going to snowball.
Yeah, the adding of the NCAA women's wrestling is massive. It's going to grow so much. The youth is going to just explode. Not that it already hasn't, but it's going to do that more because now they can see that they can go to the NCAAs and wrestle. That's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Like any kid that goes on a mat from the time he's always got like his favorite guy, right? Yeah. I guess Bryson's favorite wrestler is DeSanto.
Yeah.
And you know what? My son's a little off his rocker too, so they kind of fit together in a way. Right. Just last night, funny story. Just last night, he was at practice and he got in a little scramble with the kid, and the kid swung on him, and he was like started fighting with him. He was like beating. I was like, Jesus Christ. And then I thought about it. We were heading home. I was like, your favorite wrestler, your favorite ever is Austin DeSanto. And dude, he's a little off his rocker, but dude, so are you. And so people relate to different people. And that's what's going to happen at some point with these young girls that are coming up with these college girls that are all going to have different personalities the same way. Like Spencer Lee was like, had his hat sitting like this, you remember? And he's like, I have no excuses. I have no ACLs. You're going to have some girl like this going, I broke my arm last week, you know? So I think there's definitely going to be that same similarity. The only thing that I feel like we were talking about 20 minutes ago that has to be fixed is that middle across the board. And I think with NCAA wrestling as a woman's sport becoming a thing, it's going to force that to happen.
Right. It needs to happen for sure. So I'm excited to see what happens in the future for it.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, we've had a good little hour here. You have an amazing story. Where can people find you across the board? TikTok, Instagram, whatever that may be. Let us know. Yeah,
so Wrestle Her podcast. I have Instagram, I have TikTok, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple Music, anywhere you find your podcasts. I drop episodes every Friday at 6 a.m. and then I do a Wrestler of the Week on my Instagram. So if anybody's ever interested in that, just shoot me a message and you might be featured on my Instagram. So that's where you guys can find me.
Awesome. Last question. Your high school team, I guess state's coming around the corner, right? How's the team looking? What do you expect? Are you excited? What are you thinking?
I'm so excited. My team is a completely different team that they were from when we first started. My team's really new, so I have just a handful of girls that have ever even wrestled before. A handful of girls that were on my team last year. I have no seniors, so we're pretty new. We're pretty green, but the last couple tournaments have been really, really doing well. The first one we went to, we brought 9 girls. We don't have full weight classes, but we brought 9 girls and we placed 6. And then last weekend we brought 10 girls and we placed 7 on top 6. So we're looking pretty solid, and I'm excited to keep moving up and progressing with my team.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. I appreciate your time. Us having a great conversation about the growth of women's wrestling. I do apologize for my backdrop not working today for whatever reason. But I really did enjoy this. And again, like I said, if we can be of any service to you, I would reach out anytime. Also, when we get off here, I'll ship you a set of mat class. You can kind of pass around with your girls.
Perfect.
And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure sharing my story with you guys.
Episode 40, the Bmoney Beastin podcast is in the books.